Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Today we are here to discuss a breaking development from Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Over the last 24 to 30 hours, large scale violence and protests have broken out in PoK. Now, this is a very significant development which has serious implications not just for Pakistan but as well as for India and regional stability. So, over the last one day, we have seen massive protests declared by the Awami Action Committee, which is a civil society organization which has been fighting for the rights of the local people and the local communities against the Pakistani state. The protesters have called for a shutter down and wheel jam strike, meaning they are shutting down all the shops, stopping the movement of all the vehicles, declaring a complete bandh in PoK. These protests have engulfed all the major cities and towns in PoK, including the capital, Muzaffarabad, and other important cities such as Rawalkot, Mirpur, Kotli, Neelam Valley, etc. And as always, Pakistani state and the authorities have responded with brutal force, trying to suppress the protests. And this has led to casualties. According to latest reports, two people have already been killed and several more have been injured. Then, even amongst the diaspora of the local population from POK who are settled in United States, in Europe, etc., have been holding similar rallies and protests in foreign capitals, trying to internationalize the issue. So, this spate of protests has brought considerable pressure on Pakistan, and the developments are quite alarming and equally interesting as well. So, let's break down this topic in complete detail today over the next 15 to 20 minutes and understand what are the reasons behind the protests. Let's understand who are responsible for these protests and what is the response and the reaction of the Pakistani state. Of course, we will take a brief look at the history of the region, the complex dynamics, including the geopolitical angle, and we will discuss the implications of this development on Indian interests. But before we start, I have an important announcement. Today is the last day for you to enroll for Unacademy's online classes at a discounted price of 19,999. The Navratri offer comes to an end today. So those interested, please enroll using the code IAS English. And if you enroll within the offer period, you also stand a chance to get up to 6 to 18 months of free extension on your subscription. And you can even get CSE Assure guarantee, under which Unacademy provides you a free extension again if you fail to clear prelims for some reason and if you fulfill these conditions so that you can prepare for the next attempt free with Unacademy. So those interested, click on the link provided in the video description. Now let's focus on the discussion and let's start with the map of the region. Because to understand this topic and what's happening in POK, it's very important to look at the map to understand the geography, the history of this particular region. This map shows you the outline, and the outline here depicts the territorial claims of India. The outline of this map is showing you the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir as it existed in 1947 when it was still a princely state, which acceded to the Indian Union in 1947, thus making J&K an integral part of the Indian Union. But prior to that, prior to the accession of J&K into India, Pakistan made an illegal attempt to try and capture J&K, at least parts of it, for itself. The Pakistani state, backed by the army, sponsored tribal militias to invade the Kashmir region from Gilgit Baltistan towards Kashmir and captured several significant territories. At that point, J&K, which was a princely state under Raja Hari Singh under the Dogra dynasty, was not able to resist the Pakistani attempts. And eventually, Raja Hari Singh, who sought India's help and protection, had to sign the instrument of accession to accede to the Indian Union, following which India came to the defense of J&K, as the region had now become an integral part of the Indian territory. This is what led to the First India-Pakistan War of 1947. So this region has been an integral part of Indian Union since the instrument of accession was signed. But following the start of the war, India pushed back the Pakistani intruders, retook some of the captured areas, and given the circumstances, we took the matter to the UN. and India eventually agreed for a ceasefire. So the positions that were held by both the sides became the ceasefire line, which was codified under the then Karachi Agreement of 1949. Later, the same ceasefire line was renamed as the line of control through the 1972 Shimla Agreement, following the 1971 liberation of Bangladesh War. So, what you see here is essentially the different regions that are present as far as the territorial issue between India and Pakistan are concerned. Pakistan retains control over this part of Kashmir and the Gilgit Baltistan region, which is strategically so vital. Because Gilgit Baltistan gives an opening to the Wakhan corridor that connects with Afghanistan and further with Central Asia. It shares borders with China's Xinjiang over here. And Pakistan tries to call this part of Kashmir as Azad Kashmir. India rejects these claims, and we refer to this occupied territory as just PoK or POJK, Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. You also see China occupied Aksai Chin, which is part of Ladakh. And this area that you see here in Gilgit Baltistan is the Shaksgam Valley, which again is part of the claims made by India, which is the legally correct position of India. Pakistan, which occupied this region, ceded this territory to China in 1963 as part of the Sino Pakistan Boundary Agreement. So, China Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is part of Belt and Road Initiative, cuts through this region of POK. That's the reason why we have rejected and boycotted not just the CPEC project, but the entire Belt and Road Initiative of China. Now, in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, that is the region which Pakistan uses the word so called Azad Kashmir, and even in Gilgit Baltistan, there is a history of unrest, there is a history of discontent and resentment against the Pakistani state. Since 1947, ever since Pakistan illegally occupied these territories, Pakistan has tried to exert its dominance in this region. Constitutionally, Pakistan has given a degree of autonomy to these areas, both to Gilgit Baltistan and the POK region. And the local communities here have been demanding greater rights, better development, better governance, and they even want essential integration with Pakistan to be recognized as a province of Pakistan. But Pakistan denies these basic rights, particularly in POK, because Pakistan wants to keep its position stronger at the global level when it comes to the Kashmir issue. It has denied recognizing Gilgit Baltistan as a province and given some degree of autonomy because it wants to ensure that the Kashmir issue, whenever it is settled, that Pakistan will have an upper hand, that Pakistan will want to merge these territories into the territory of Pakistan. Now, in Gilgit Baltistan, also, we have seen such history of protests and demands. And in the occupied area of Kashmir, we have seen repeated such incidents occurring in the last few years alone. So, Pakistani state, particularly the deep state, the army, the ISI, have dominated this region, primarily used it for their hostile activities against India. Terror launch pads and terror camps are located over here. The whole terror infrastructure has essentially led to the destabilization of the security situation here. And this has been Pakistan's obsession to use POK to target India, to cause infiltration into Jammu and Kashmir, and sponsor the insurgency and terrorism on the Indian side. So, development, governance has always been the least priority. The local economy has been completely neglected. More importantly, the political and the fundamental rights of the people of this region has been completely suppressed by the Pakistani state. So, this is what leads to the growing resentment and discontent in this region. Now, if you look at the past, in fact, experts also believe that the current protest that you're witnessing, it goes back all the way till 2022, 2023, when similar protests were witnessed in POK. Some of you might recollect, even last year in May 2024, large scale violent protests were witnessed in this region as the people were demanding the continuation of subsidies on wheat flour and electricity because these basic necessities have become expensive for the local communities and they are no longer able to sustain their livelihood. There have been protests regarding the power tariff as well for the hydropower generated at the Mangla Dam in Mirpur. These large projects are controlled by the Pakistani elite, by the politicians, and by the elite classes, and as well as some of the Kashmir refugees who are settled here, who are closer to the Pakistani establishment in Islamabad and Rawalpindi. So the local community here They feel that they are losing out their identity, their rights and resources to the political elite and the Kashmiri refugees whom they treat as outsiders. Pakistan remains in close connection with the Kashmiri refugees who have left India essentially, sought refuge over here, and uses them to score brownie points against India. So the political class and the Pakistani state in Rawalpindi, in Islamabad, they are closer to the Kashmiri elite and the political class, and they largely control the larger aspects of the economy and the bigger projects, including hydropower projects and power distribution. Whereas the poor people, the local communities, they suffer eventually. So this has led to a social and economic distinction as far as this region is concerned. Even the protests in 2022 was largely related to the local economy and the high prices of power, wheat, water, etc. There have been long-standing demands in PoK by the local residents who oppose integration with Pakistan. There have been calls for independence as well. Even yesterday, you might have seen visuals on social media where protesters were holding slogans and calling out slogans and holding banners calling for azadi, calling for complete freedom from Pakistan. In many ways, the table has turned around for Pakistan. Pakistan, which has been pushing such protests deliberately, sponsoring such separatist activities in India, in Jammu and Kashmir, is now essentially receiving the same treatment. So, this represents a critical moment as far as the India Pakistan relationship is concerned and the Kashmir issue is concerned. So, in the last 2, 3 years, when such protests were happening, India had a very clear stand. India pointed out that such violence and resentment and discontent is a natural consequence because Pakistan has never governed the area, never focused on administration and upliftment of the people of this region. It is simply obsessed with the territory. It is obsessed with Kashmir issue, which it is using to stab India repeatedly. So India said that the unrest is a natural consequence of the continued systemic exploitation of the region, the denial of rights to the people of Kashmir, and it's a natural consequence of the illegal nature of the occupied territory. So this has been India's stand. But now the point is, why are the protests happening again? Who's behind the latest episode of protests? And what are the specific reasons? What are their demands? And what does this imply for India? This is the final point you need to understand here. The latest round of protests have been led by a civil society group known as the Awami Action Committee. It comprises of local community leaders and it has the backing of lawyers and the local business owners as well. The Awami Action Committee, it is essentially fighting for the rights of the local people. It is fighting for the better development of the region, better control over the resources of the region, and they are calling it a fight for their fundamental rights. The allegation is that Pakistani state has denied them fundamental rights. The Awami Action Committee and the larger civil society here, they were actually holding talks with the Pakistani government, and these talks collapsed last week. Ministers from the Pakistani government under Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, they actually met with the protesters a few days ago, held interactions on how to resolve the crisis and the demands, and eventually the talks broke down. They had submitted a list of demands to the Pakistani government, but the ministers refused to consider them, leading to the breakdown of the talks and negotiations, and that explains why the protests have broken out. But however, there is another angle to this. There is another element present here. Yesterday, when Awami Action Committee was actually conducting a peaceful march and a protest asking for freedom and fundamental rights, they were countered by a violent group, a counter group, the Pro-Pakistan Muslim Conference. The Muslim Conference is backed by the Pakistani Army and as well as the intelligence agency ISI. According to Indian experts, the Muslim Conference gets the support of the thugs and the agents who are sponsored by the ISI and the army. So they held a so called peace rally to counter the Awami Action Committee's protests. But trust me, there was nothing peaceful about the rally which was taken by the Muslim Conference yesterday. Again, if you have seen the visuals that are circulating on social media, you will notice that the supporters of Muslim Conference, with the backing of the police and security forces, they were the ones who instigated the violence. They opened fire against the protesters, against the leaders of Awami Action Committee, and they were the ones who killed the innocent protesters as well. So this escalated quickly, turned into violence, and as always, Pakistani state has been trying to crush the violence and the protest which has broken out. According to reports, thousands of troops are being rushed by the Pakistani state from Punjab and the other regions. And it is trying to even bring in armed forces if required to try and suppress the dissent and the movement which has broken out. Pakistan has suspended all the internet connection, mobile connections as well. And that shows how Pakistani response is always high handed, which highlights the humanitarian situation as well in the problematic areas of Pakistan. We have seen similar instances in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which we will address shortly. But what are the reasons behind the protests? Are there any specific factors? See, first and foremost, there is a general discontent and resentment amongst the local people, as I told you, because for more than 7 decades, the local communities here in PoK believe that they've been denied their basic fundamental rights. There is rampant corruption in the local semi autonomous administration which is in place. There's a lot of bribery which the local politicians resort to, and the resources of this region has been plundered by the Pakistani elite. There is also grievance that Kashmiri refugees have been given a greater representation in the local legislative assembly. So the local community is trying to fight for their political representation, trying to fight for their economic rights, for their development, and for their basic rights. Especially the rising cost of living, rising prices of electricity, water, and especially wheat and wheat flour, the removal of the subsidies. This is what has triggered the people here, and that is the immediate cause for these protests. Now, the Awami Action Committee and the civil society, which is leading the protests, they have submitted a 38-point charter to the Pakistani government, which highlights the demands of the civil society in PoK. Amongst the demands, there are 4 or 5 major points which all of you should be aware of. The first major demand is with regard to the reserved seats or the reservation which is given to Kashmiri refugees in the local legislative assembly. Since the region has been granted some sort of limited autonomy, there is a local legislative assembly in Muzaffarabad, and 12 seats here are reserved for Kashmiri refugees. As I told you, these refugees are essentially separatists as far as India is concerned. They have taken shelter in Pakistan. They have been closer to the elite in Pakistan. They are closer to Islamabad and Rawalpindi, to the government and the army and the ISI. And they have returned the favor by giving them greater role and representation in POK's politics. Now, this is disliked by the local community. They want this representation for Kashmiri refugees to end. So they've demanded the abolition of the 12 reserved seats for Kashmiri refugees. The other important demand is to end the privileged status of the elite, the political class and the Kashmiri elite. As I told you, most big projects are controlled by them. So the protesters are demanding, for example, hydropower projects, which are controlled by the elite, that is leading to higher cost of electricity. They want such projects to be renegotiated so power tariffs can go down and it can actually benefit the local community. And they want the subsidies to be brought back to ensure affordable wheat flour, affordable power, and they want social welfare to be provided by the Pakistani state, better education, better healthcare. Because these aspects of governance have always been ignored and neglected by the militarized rogue state of Pakistan. Now, this is a clear indicator that Pakistan is dealing with a massive, massive internal problem. The question is Pakistan losing its grip on POK? What does this mean for India? And again, as conspiracies allege, is there a Indian role behind these possible protests? I would not like to dive into speculation, but the conspiracy theories indicate a possible role for India as well, that India might be covertly backing the protests. But again, when there is no evidence to indicate that, it's better we stay away from conspiracy theories and focus on what we know, the facts that we know. See, it is a fact that internally Pakistan is dealing with a massive multi front problem. It has a security situation across multiple regions, and it is staring at an existential economic crisis. Just last week in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Pakistan bombed its own territory, killing innocent civilians, leading to massive protests. and we have seen rising presence of terrorist groups and terrorist activities in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The KP province has always been a hotbed of extremism, which has been dominated by Taliban, even Al Qaeda, and other terror entities. And now, terror groups like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed are also stepping up their presence in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, especially after Operation Sindoor. After India targeted the terror camps and even the headquarters of these terror organizations, they have been shifting base and trying to find new locations in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, closer to Peshawar, closer to the Afghan border, to stay as far away as possible from India, which means they are preparing for a revival of their activities. And in the future, if India decides to retaliate, they want to keep the terror facilities as far away from Indian reach as possible. So Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is always on the boil. There are serious accusations of human rights violations and atrocities by the Pakistani state on the local people. In Balochistan, the insurgency and the separatist movement has been very active under the groups such as the Baloch Liberation Army, which recently carried out the Jafar Express hijacking. And here Pakistan has retaliated with brutal force again, leading to large scale human rights violations, kidnappings, and illegal killings. Pakistan alleges that India is responsible for the crisis in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But again, it has never presented any credible proof or evidence to link India's raw with these developments in Pakistan. India clearly denies these charges. Outright, we reject these charges. This largely is Pakistan's own creation. A state obsessed with radicalism, a state obsessed with waging a war against India, has of course neglected its population. It has ignored development and prioritized militarization and radicalism. And this is the eventual outcome. Today, its economy is crumbling. It's on the verge of going bankrupt. It is merely surviving on donations from its all weather friends like China, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. It is desperately dependent on the bailout package given by the IMF. So these are difficult times for Pakistan, and it represents both a challenge and an opportunity for India. See, on one hand, the developments in PoK, the widespread protests, could have long term and larger implications for India's own territorial claims. As I said, our official stand is that the whole of J&K as it existed in 1947, before the accession, before Pakistan carried out the illegal invasion, the whole of J&K belongs to India, which is the rightful and legal claim of India. Now, the protests, if they were to spiral out of control, maybe the protesters are drawing inspiration from Nepal like protests. Maybe they're looking to overthrow the administration itself, right? So, if the violence and the protests were to escalate, there might be a possibility that local communities might try to push towards independence. Because we have seen such calls being given on the streets, calling for Azadi from Pakistan. While partially it might be good news for India, it might create further complications when it comes to resolving the Kashmir issue. On the other hand, we should be prepared for potential escalation with Pakistan. This is a known tactic. Whenever Pakistan faces a major internal problem, it tries to create a distraction. And what is the distraction? The distraction is basically a massive terror attack against India. There is a history behind this. As they say, history repeats. Pakistan is a known rogue actor. Whenever it has faced internal problems on this scale, whenever there has been a major political or security crisis, it has tried to distract the local audience towards the external threat, which is India. It tries to instigate tensions with India deliberately, invite a response from India by triggering India through a massive terror attack. So, this is something India should be considering and preparing for, which means we need to step up our intelligence gathering. We need to be on the alert, step up our border security along the line of control as well to check any possible infiltration attempts. And also, don't forget, Pakistan is now having the blessings of the White House. Under Donald Trump, the US and Pakistan are playing a deadly game where US is encouraging the rogue behavior of Pakistan, rewarding Pakistan for its misdemeanors. So this is something India should keep in mind as far as the larger geopolitical consequences are concerned. Pakistan might feel emboldened to do whatever it wants now that it has the backing of the US, and it might easily try to create a distraction by trying to sponsor a big attack on India to ensure that the local crisis can be handled. The other concern is prolonged regional instability. The continued crisis here could increase the instability, and this could spill over into the Indian side, into Jammu and Kashmir, into Ladakh. And on the other hand, This is an opportunity that presents for India to expose Pakistan and to isolate Pakistan. India can raise this issue at United Nations and global platforms, and we should corner Pakistan for human rights violations. Because that's what Pakistan does without valid basis against India. Whenever there is trouble in Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan tries to portray it as India's oppression of J&K, as India committing human rights violations in J&K. So this is an opportunity. There is a legitimate ground. Unlike Pakistani false claims, India has a legitimate ground to argue that Pakistan is violating the human rights of the people of Kashmir on the other side of LOC in PoK. India needs to expose the, the radical nature of the Pakistani state and how development has been compromised, fundamental rights have been denied, expose how Pakistani security forces abuse the authority and even unleash the violence on civilians. So it's an opportunity for India to expose the human rights violations of Pakistan and isolate the country diplomatically at the global level. But this is still a developing story. It's too early to predict what exactly might happen. I hope this short discussion has given you some insight into what's happening in PoK and what the future might hold. So let me know what you think about this crisis in the comments below. And on this note, I would like to bring the discussion to an end. If you like the session, do press the like button and share the video with other aspirants. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.